Welcome to Realizing Resilience, a podcast from the Connecticut Women's Consortium. We're not behavioral health professionals, but we're your gateway to real conversations with the experts. Each episode, we'll delve into the vast landscape of mental health, from personal stories to expert insights. Together, we'll bridge the gap between clinical expertise and personal experiences, connecting with diverse voices and perspectives. Join us for insightful conversations that demystify the world of mental health.
Beth Robins Roth, APRN, SEP, is a bilingual somatic experiencing practitioner and a family nurse practitioner. In 1993, she founded the mindfulness-based stress reduction program at the Community Health Center in Meriden, where for 21 years she taught meditation in English and Spanish to adults with chronic health issues. In 2016, she opened Hummingbird Trauma Resolution, a medical practice specializing in a mind-body approach to resolving trauma and PTSD, physical pain, and chronic stress. She does trauma healing work with individuals and teaches experiential educational group programs in somatic experiencing trauma healing. Beth also does professional training for medical providers, mental health clinicians, substance abuse counselors, social service providers, physical therapists, lawyers, and other professionals throughout Connecticut, and staff development for nonprofit organizations in Connecticut and New York. Welcome back, everyone, to Realizing Resilience. My name is Marisa.
And I'm Alana.
And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Beth Robins Roth. Hello, Beth. Thanks for speaking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start off this conversation just for someone who's never heard of somatic healing before. Could you kind of explain that in more simple, digestible terms, and then kind of what some of the benefits are with working with someone like through trauma and through the body this way?
So first, I'll just clarify that at this point in time, there's lots of different ways of working with people that go under an umbrella term of somatics, meaning that it includes the body. What I'm trained in and what I do is something specific within that big umbrella, which is called Somatic Experiencing Trauma Healing. So I'm going to be speaking about that. I'm not that familiar with other somatic approaches, but this one I am very familiar with. So Somatic Experiencing was developed by our founder, whose name is Peter Levine, over 40 years of clinical work with clients and research and study with professionals in a lot of fields. So it is really multidisciplinary. He doesn't even call it a modality. He calls it an approach. And multidisciplinary, meaning that he has extensively studied and brought into somatic experiencing stress physiology, psychology, biology, neuroscience, medical biophysics, ethology, which is the study of animals in their natural habitats. And he's also researched in clinical exchanges with indigenous healers in different cultures on different continents. The other thing I want to say, and then I'll speak to the approach, is right now, somatic experiencing practitioners like myself, people who've graduated from the 3-year training programs, there's about 7,000 of us trained by Somatic Experiencing International in 67 countries. What I will say about it is it's really based on a different understanding of what trauma and PTSD is, because in our culture and in our mental health care system, we see PTSD as a mental health disorder. And somatic experiencing, based on research and clinical work from all these fields, has a different approach that PTSD is actually a physiologic injury to our nervous system that occurs at the time of some overwhelming, life-threatening, or dangerous experience that a person has. And it's caused by the massive production of neurochemicals from the brain, hormones from the adrenal glands that are designed to enable the person to fight back and win or run away and escape. But that because we're humans, we have that through our evolution. That's our nervous system. But most of the things that threaten us are not things that we can fight back against or run away from. And so then the nervous system goes into a default mode of a freeze response to survive. So what Peter Levine really kind of discovered or came upon is that a lot of this is locked in the body, and that's what's fueling the symptoms that might make it look like a mental health disorder, severe anxiety, panic attacks, depression, despair, helplessness, insomnia, difficulties regulating one's emotions in relationships. All of that clearly looks mental health like and behavioral, and we're not disagreeing that all of those can be symptoms along with avoidance of many situations, et cetera. But the idea is this is being fueled by an injury in our body's nervous system. And so we need to work with the body in order to heal. And usually what that involves is helping people. People come with very different amounts of familiarity and comfort with their own body, even feeling sensation in the body, hot, cold. I mean, people know hungry and thirsty and tired, but people need to be helped sometimes to identify a whole range of other sensations like vibration and tension and tightness and constriction and looseness and softness and firmness, and be able to expand the tolerance for bringing attention to the body, feeling these things, having the words to name them. And that's one of the ways we start. And then we work with body gesture, hand movements, body movements, vocalizations using our voice to very gently release these patterns from the body. And that's a lot of where the healing comes in. So that's my first answer to the first question. I don't know if that's too much or you want to hone in on one part of that a little more. Actually, let me say one more thing is that because this is the approach and the understanding, somatic experiencing is not a modality that lives in the mental health care system, that any professional, any person that works with other humans in their work world or even in their personal world, if they're interested, they could train and become a somatic experiencing practitioner. So in my training, for example, there were nurses, nurse practitioners, acupuncturists, there were massage therapists, Feldenkrais teachers, EMTs, guidance counselors, life coaches, equine therapists that work with horses, and a lot of psychotherapists. But I found that really fascinating that it's designed to be incorporated into the work that a person is doing with whatever population of children, adolescents, families, adults, whoever they work with, to be able to incorporate this into what they're already doing.
So it definitely makes sense that you, as a person with a background in nursing and mindfulness, would relate to this modality, but how did you come across it? What drew you to it?
So that's a very interesting question. The answer is somewhat personal in that I had been practicing meditation on a daily basis for decades and teaching mindfulness in a healthcare setting to patients, also teaching Buddhism at a Unitarian church when I went through a very difficult period in my own life and was diagnosed with PTSD. I didn't even know that's what it was for a couple of years. And then when I was looking for treatment, I found some really wonderful psychotherapists. They were very well trained, very compassionate, but I felt like I was failing in the therapy somehow, like it just wasn't really helping that much. And I thought maybe I'm not failing. Maybe I need something that involves the body more because I'm so body oriented from the Buddhism and mindfulness, and also being an athlete. When I was young, I was a triathlete and I did triathlons and I've done a lot of yoga and a lot of sports. So that's when I started looking for something that involved the body. But this wasn't what I initially found. I found another modality and that was a little helpful. I think it was called bioenergetics, but I could tell it wasn't what I really needed. So I just kept looking, and then I found somatic experiencing through a book on the bookshelf of the therapist I was seeing for bioenergetics. And as soon as I read the introduction, it was one of Peter Levine's earlier books called Waking the Tiger. I read the introduction and it just made perfect sense to me. I went right online. I started looking for a practitioner in Connecticut, reached out to 3. The first one that got back to me, I had an appointment with her the next week. And it was the beginning of healing really from PTSD. And very soon after that, she encouraged me to do the professional training because I was involved in work where that would come in so naturally and be such a good fit for the work I was already doing. And the first training was happening in Connecticut then in response to the Sandy Hook school shootings that then our international organization brought a training to Connecticut. So I was in that training in 2013.
You've worked with such a wide range of professionals throughout your career, even from physical therapists and lawyers. And so, why do you think it's important for people, even outside of the traditional mental health roles, to learn about somatic experiencing?
I think one of the reasons is that in our culture we have a misunderstanding of what trauma is, and also therefore of how it's might be healed or resolved. So the definition that in somatic experiencing, which really is on a foundation of neuroscience, what is trauma to begin with? It's defined as trauma is not anything that happens to you, it's what happens inside of you in response to something that happens to you. And we define it as a perceived life threat in circumstances of helplessness. So, perceived life threat, the perceived part says this is very subjective. Nobody can look at anything that another person has gone through and say, oh, that would be traumatizing or that wouldn't be traumatizing. That's the perceived part. Life threat is far larger than a threat to that individual's life. Perceived life threat is a threat to, could be to our very life. It could be to our identity. It could be to our emotional world. It could be to anyone else who we love. It could be to anything else that we cherish, a place. It could be to our most deeply held values. All of that could be part of what's meant by perceived life threat. And then the second part of the definition, in circumstances of helplessness, that means that we are innately biologically programmed to be able to respond to threats. That's what animals do in the wild, and we've evolved from there. But like I mentioned before, very rarely can we actually flee or fight. And so much gets then locked in our system. And the reason why I think this is so applicable to all different professions and people in different walks of life is that most humans have had some experiences, the result of which would qualify for that definition of trauma, right? And as a country right now, we're going through a total crisis of information of life threat and danger and threat and chaos 24/7. What we're aware of is the tip of the iceberg, because most of what our nervous system assesses and receives from outside of us is even below the level of our conscious awareness. And then most people have had life experiences, whether in the family, the community, at work, where they have felt some sort of threat and really were helpless to respond. So one reason, in answer to your question, that I work with professionals from so many different, walks of life is because everyone is going to encounter people who are suffering from trauma. And if we understand it better, whether we're a physical therapist or whether we're a nurse or whether we're a guidance counselor in a middle school or whether we're a lawyer, if we understand that better, we will be able to understand ourselves better in our role, right? And regulate ourselves better. And we'll be able to understand the people we work with better and be more effective in helping them. So I bring this to any audience. I've done a lot of work actually with staffs, the entire staffs of nonprofit agencies, including refugee and immigrant resettlement organizations in Connecticut and New York. And also, I don't know if you're familiar with an organization in New Haven called All Our Kin. They train daycare providers throughout New York and Connecticut. So I've done work with their staff. I've done work in English and Spanish with their daycare providers who are in their network. And then they bring it to the children in their daycare and to the parents. So much of this is so naturalistic, meaning once you hear it and you learn some of the practices to do, it feels so natural, so right. You can turn around in a 2 days later and teach it to someone else, a child or an adult. So the ripple effect, when I can do outreach to lawyers and physical therapists and doctors and mental health therapists and parents, teachers, it's just really great.
I used to teach. I wish I knew about this while I was teaching, because that's a thing too where I feel like I went into it aware, I guess, that I was going to have to bear the burden of other people's emotions a lot and be a facilitator of healing almost for other people's trauma, for my kids' trauma. But I don't think I knew how much that would personally affect me until I was in it. So I love this as almost like a preventative approach too.
Yeah. The other thing is it's part of self-awareness. Like so much of it is education and experience in the sessions with the practitioner. You're guided to have new experiences in your body. And then those experiences help to release past trauma and heal the nervous system. And then you have more regulation of emotion and behavior. But the other thing I'll add, really, to amplify this is, although somatic experiencing, Peter Levine developed it for people with PTSD during a time before PTSD was even a DSM diagnosis. So he had full reign, in terms of what is this? And there's so little known about it, and how can we help? But he brought it into the healing communities for PTSD. Right now, somatic experiencing is cutting edge treatment for chronic pain patients in the United States and Canada and Western Europe, which is one of the most difficult and most common reasons and conditions that people present to healthcare providers for is chronic physical pain. Some of the doctors in this country who are training other professionals, mental health professionals and medical providers, to work with chronic pain patients, they have somatic experiencing practitioners in their practice, and that's part of what they use. It's also now being used for so many other conditions because it works directly with the autonomic nervous system, which is like a central clearing. It's like the central switchboard for all your other systems. The autonomic nervous system is involved in respiration, in your cardiovascular system, in your immune system, in your digestive system, in your nervous system. So we work with people with such a range of medical issues right now, including long COVID, including fibromyalgia and all kinds of chronic pain conditions, all kinds of digestive disorders, functional neurological disorders, which means that people have just incapacitating symptoms, and there's not one MRI or diagnostic study that can figure out what's causing it. They get sent to us. Because we work with the nervous system. That's on the medical side. Then on the so-called mental health side, we work with people with especially anxiety disorders, panic disorders, insomnia, with depression. So right now, somatic experiencing is really moving into so many facets of healthcare, both medical and mental health, because it's proven helpful outside of just for PTSD. So that would be another reason to reach out to professionals in all walks of life, right? In different fields, to know about this.
Yeah, this already has so much interest, this training. For those who cannot attend, who are interested in maybe learning a little bit more, can you give us just a little nugget of everyday somatic experiencing? So something that you can do to support regulation and resilience.
So there's lots of things that we teach people to do. Just thinking of some very, very simple ones that you wouldn't need to see demonstrated even, right? So I'm going to offer two, okay? One is, I think other professionals do this too, grounding practices, because when people are feeling upset, stressed, anxious, dysregulated, it's really hard to feel like we're really in our body in those moments. Like it's as if energetically there's this swirl going around our head of all the thoughts, or maybe including the upper chest if there's heaviness or tightness or pressure or difficulty breathing. So to help people get back down into their body all the way to their feet is critical. And when they do, it takes just 1 second, like a sweep, and then the anxiety or the thinking pattern or the emotional, whatever they were caught up with, shifts immediately. So we do these many different types of grounding practices. The simplest one, because You can do just sitting in your chair, and you put your feet on the floor, and 1 foot at a time, you just press that foot a little more firmly into the floor. And you feel the contact between the foot and the floor increasing. You feel a little increased tension in the calf muscle, even maybe in the thigh. And then you release it, and you do it with the other foot. This is one of the simplest things. Another grounding practice we do standing up, where super slow motion, you just shift a part of your weight a little bit onto one leg, and then come back, and then shift onto the other leg and come back. Another way sitting down is just for a person to slide their hands, palms up under their thighs, and it kind of connects up the upper and lower part of the body and helps you to feel like you're more in your body in your chair. Any of these things as grounding practices can be really helpful. We also use what I call toys or props for sensory motor awareness, like ankle weights with Velcro that people can just wear for a few minutes and help that sense of, yes, I feel my feet again. I feel the lower part of my body. I'm now better redistributed, and with my attention and my energy. So we also have things like that. Another practice I'll just tell you right now, we use the voice a lot because we're mammals, and mammals use their voices all the time. They use their voices for celebration, for communication, for joy. They also use their voices to call out for help of others of their species, or their little groupings. And they use their voices in self-defense too. So we use a practice of a sound that we make. I'm going to demonstrate it in a second. Anybody can do it. It's really easy. All sound is vibration. And the reason why sounds that are different from each other sound different is because they're vibrating at different frequencies. So there's been research done for what frequency of vibration does our vagus nerve most find soothing. And the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in our body, other than our spinal cord. It goes from way up in the brainstem and then out, little hole in the skull, down the sides of the neck, and then it goes down through the chest to the heart and lungs, and then it goes below the diaphragm to every one of our organs. So if we can vibrate that nerve with a sound whose frequency, the vibration is very soothing, then the messages go all over our body of calmness, of regulation, of safety, and they come up again to the brain. So it's a full circle of not just one direction, but two directions. So the sound, I'll make it in a moment. I'm just explaining why it works. It's called the VOO because that's what it sounds like. If you had to write it, you would write it in English with the letter VOO. So it sort of rhymes with zoo. In Spanish, it would be ve de vaca and then oo. So we start out making the sound. The lips are kind of in the shape that they would be for any word that starts with the letter V, right? Violet, velvet, like that. But then the sound that comes after that is ooh, like that. The thing about these practices too is if it's a sound or if it's a movement, when the sound is over or the movement is over, the practice is not over. We train people, help people to be able to stay quite still and quiet for another 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds in order to get better skilled at feeling the subtle changes that are happening. And then when you notice them, they're not subtle anymore. So that's the VOO, and I'll show it to you. People can hear it. All you do is feel that you're breathing, because you'll need to inhale, not super big, but you need to breathe in order to make a sound. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to take a slightly bigger breath in, then I'm going to make the sound. It lasts for however long that breath lasts, and then it's over. It doesn't matter. I've been doing this for more than 10 years, so my little VOO has gotten a little bigger, but it could be any duration. It can be, softer, can last just a few seconds or longer. So this is what it sounds like. VOO. There's the silence. When people are first learning this, to be silent for 10 seconds can feel like a lot. Then after that, I say to them, hey, I wear a chunky watch with a big second hand. You tell me how many seconds you want. Oh, they'll say 30, 50, 60, to really enjoy this sense of like the body relaxing, and then up to the mind feeling like things slow down, the mind feels more spacious, thoughts are slowing down. Almost everybody finds this beneficial, like right away, and people start telling me, I'm wooing in the car, I'm wooing in the shower, I'm driving my grandson to soccer when a traffic jam, and I hear this little voice in the back seat saying, Grandma, time to woo. So people really, the daycare providers, they had all the kids doing it in the little classroom. I mean, these things are so simple, and once people can get over like sort of feeling self-conscious or whatever, if it's really new, most people really take to it and find it beneficial.
We had a training for staff about burnout and all that stuff, and we were wooing together as a group, and it was
That's great. We do that.
really nice to do.
Yeah, it's great. When I did the training for daycare providers, it was virtual. I did 6 weeks with English speaking, 6 weeks with Spanish speaking, but the Spanish speaking group, they were sneaking friends in who hadn't registered. They were asking me to record if they had to miss it. They said it was the best training they've ever had in the organization. I mean, it's really interesting. You never know who's going to really soak it up like a sponge and want to be sharing it with other people. And we teach so many. I mean, I probably teach 30 or more practices. None of them take more than a minute to do, but that's because everyone's different. Not everyone's going to be drawn to the same practice, but I want to make sure that there's some that each person will be drawn to and want to use.
I want to thank you so much for speaking with us today. This was a great conversation. You really had me hooked in after you said that no one really understands the definition of trauma. I was in it at that moment. So I think this training is going to be really beneficial for a lot of people.
Good. Well, I thank you for your interest in hosting the training, and also for doing this introduction today.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you both.
Links will be in the description to learn more about Beth and her work, and sign up for Somatic Experiencing Trauma Healing, Introduction to Principles and Practices on May 20th. Check out our links below to keep up with us at the Connecticut Women's Consortium. Thank you for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time.